The summer between junior year of high school and senior year, I had a lot of firsts, including my own account with what I believe to be a Skinwalker. After talking to my grandmother, who's half-blooded Navajo, she believes that we've had something following our family ever since we left the res. I never had any experiences myself, not until that summer, where this thing would start appearing almost everywhere I go. It first happened when I was walking back from the store one evening, visiting a friend's house. I had gotten some candy and a pop, and was walking home, just minding my own business, listening, jamming out to Spotify, when I saw this strange tall coyote figure off in the distance on the hillside. I didn't really think much of it, and kind of just shrugged it off as maybe I'm seeing things in the evening light. But I looked again, and this figure, which appeared to look like a tall coyote, walking on two legs, coming toward me, but at a diagonal angle. This only caused me to walk faster. Now I was a little freaked out, and I did not know exactly if this was a person in a costume or what I was going to be dealing with. As I picked up my pace, whatever this person or thing was also picked up their pace. And before you know it, this thing was within 30 feet of me. So I stopped, looked directly at it, in hopes to make it stop. I know that sounds incredibly cheesy, but at 17 years of age, I had no idea what else to do. I knew running would probably only make it chase me even more. And it stopped, looked at me, and it was right at that point that I could see into its eyes. They were very dark, but the irises in the pupil were almost like a glowing ambery orange, very evil looking. The face looked very sunken down, very dark, and not in a color dark way, like there was something wrong with it. And for whatever reason, I believed that what I was looking at was completely from the demonic realm. It was kind of like half man, half coyote, except the head was entirely coyote, but the body and the legs were more man-like than anything else. I kind of just quickly looked down, paused my Spotify, and slowly backed away as this thing stood still and never took its eyes off me. I backpedaled and backpedaled until I could turn around and think to myself, I'm going to make a run for it and take a chance. If this thing follows me, I'm hoping I can outrun it. So I backpedaled some more, with this thing still staring me down, eyes on me like a dagger, and in one fluid motion, I turned around and sprinted faster than a high school track runner, all the way down the block, down a second block, down the next block, never looking back, and never hearing this thing following me. Once I'd made it several blocks, right to where near the store where I bought my candy and pop. I looked back, didn't see anything, didn't hear anything. I felt like I was safe, for the time being. So I walked home the long way, which took an extra 40 minutes from where I was at. Once I got home, I felt really uneasy the rest of the night. Like my entire night was just ruined. I was in a foul mood. Not just obvious distress, but something had disrupted me, emotionally, internally. I feel it was this point that I felt like I was marked. A couple of days go by, and I just get the feeling that maybe it's a good idea that I speak to my grandmother and tell her about what I had encountered a few days before. I knew how she was. She's what I would call very superstitious, even though she still believes in a lot of the native lore, and her beliefs very much so come from that area. I was still very worried that I would be met with conflict and a lot of doubt, but surprisingly, I just said, you know what, screw it. So I called her up, told her what had happened, and she asked that I come over immediately so she could bless me. While she wasn't anything special, like a medicine lady, she was good friends with one of the local medicine men from the res, who actually traveled over 300 miles to come to us to bless me. Well, I think that's great. We still had sightings and encounters the rest of that summer. One time, about a month later, I was spending time with my grandmother's house. At nighttime, we were outside, smoking cigarettes, joking around. This is in Southern California, far away from the reservation. I didn't think I had anything to worry about, but I was very wrong. And at the time, I didn't think anything of the lore or any of the beliefs of the Navajo. In fact, one of my good friends was actually a mix of Choctaw and Cherokee, and he thinks the entire thing is all baloney. Doesn't believe any of it. He's pretty much rooted in modern-day culture, though. So, the only roots to his native culture are his blood. I pretty much sided with him before all of this happened. But once I started having my encounters, I kind of switched to the other direction as far as my beliefs go. Having first-hand accounts with something will definitely change the way you think and feel about anything in particular. So, anyway, we're out there, smoking cigarettes, joking around, and the sun's pretty much setting really low in the sky. We kind of just get lost in telling each other stories and talking about fun memories we have together. And before you know it, it's pretty much almost pitch dark out. My grandmother's inside, and she's probably wanting to know when my friend is going to leave, so she can spend time with me. At one point or another, him or I were mid-sentence when we both felt this distinct change in the air and atmosphere around us. It was so noticeable that as soon as it happened, I felt the change on both of our faces, like our expressions had changed from normal to now, what's going on? We both instantly began looking around us, expecting somebody to be near. But it was so dark now that we couldn't see anything, and we did not have any flashlights, only our phones, and the flashlight app on our phone isn't all that bright. I mean, you could only see maybe 5 or 7 feet in front of you. Whatever we felt wasn't good. We quickly wrapped up our conversation, threw our cigarettes down, and walked back into the house. Very quickly, he's like, "Hey man, I think I'm going to take off." And so, I didn't argue with him. I just wished him well on his way. So he heads out, and I start talking to my grandma, and maybe 30 seconds goes by, and I immediately remember I needed to borrow $20 from him. So I run outside, and remember, it's pretty dark out now, and I call to him, and I hear him call back to me. So I run up to him, and I'm like, "Hey man, I forgot to ask you, from earlier, could I borrow that $20? And instantly, I feel this force come at both of us. It made us both jump, and we both take off running. The only way I know how to explain it is that it felt like something very evil coming right for us, and our bodies just reacted to the emotion and took off running in the same direction. We both ran and ran until we got to a couple streets down, where him and I are panting, not knowing exactly what was pursuing us. I knew right then and there, it's exactly what I saw a month ago, the same creature. So I tell him, forget trying to run away. Let's run in a big loop around the neighborhood and circle our way back to my grandmother's house, because I'm sure at this point, she's probably wondering why I have not come back inside. So we do that, and it takes us about 12 minutes, being very stealthy, very careful, but we could still feel a change, a very distinctive change in the atmosphere. It's incredibly creepy. We make our way back to the house, praying that this thing did not follow us. We get inside, and my grandmother immediately notices both our faces are pale white, and we look scared out of our minds. She knows, and immediately calls her friend, the medicine man, and says that she knows what happened. We need to be blessed immediately. Yeah, that summer was a wild one, and since then, I try not to mess around too much with things I don't know too much about. There were other small incidents here and there, but those were the main two that were actually worth writing about. And the fact that the second time, I feel like whatever this thing was, assuming it is a skinwalker, wanted to attack me, potentially kill me. Why it had targeted me and my family, I'm not too sure. I also don't know too much about my family's history on my mother's side, which is my grandmother, who's half Navajo, and her side, which, if you keep going up the family tree, is all full-blooded Navajo. Maybe the family on her side did something, and this thing has been tracking us down ever since. This is all just guessing, of course, because I really don't know, and I have not asked my grandmother. But, even as I write this, maybe it's time I do. I'm scared writing this. We were checking on an escaped rooster in the woods that has backed our house. We took a very shanty flashlight, spotted him quite easily. Something about these woods just aren't right. They feel off, and I had a terrifying encounter with something in them that to this day is both unexplained and witnessed by the police, my neighbor, and my girlfriend. But that's a story for another day. Anyway, we were walking back after successfully locating our escaped rooster, perched in the distance on a tree branch just beyond the woodline. This is when we both noticed a gray mist-like thing in the sky, almost like an owl. The problem is, we both witnessed it vanish into thin air. We went inside for a moment to check on our daughter, and when we went back out to figure out what that was, we found nothing, or so we thought. The house next door built a shed with a motion detection light in their front lawn. We were standing in our front lawn, looking into the trees with a better flashlight, expecting to see an owl. Instead of the motion light kicks on, and we see a dog. Sorta. It was something on 4 legs, and it ran into the distance, only looking back a few times. Problem with this is the dog would have had to have been standing still for at least 10 minutes to not re-trigger the motion light, as it stays on after being activated for 10 minutes. It's like the dog appeared out of thin air, in front of the motion light. The strangest part, that it appeared right where we say the misty air creature disappears. What are your thoughts? I'm terrified. Could this be a skinwalker, a shapeshifter, or something else completely unnatural? This happened to me in the mid-1990s. I was stationed at Camp Pendleton, California, and had duty one evening. Part of the duty shift is to go around and check that certain doors and buildings were securely locked. At about 3 a.m, I was out doing my rounds, and I saw what I thought was a big coyote in the road. Seeing a coyote in that area would be unusual, but not impossible. As I was watching it, and it watching me, it stood up on hind legs, walked out of sight between a couple of buildings. At this point, I was alarmed, but I figured I was hallucinating, since I'd been awake for something like 24 hours. Wouldn't be the first time my tired eyes and brain had played tricks on me. Later on that morning, one of my fellow Marines, I'll call him H, asked me how my duty was. One thing to understand is that the Marines seem to have a relatively large number of Native Americans. May have something to do with the pride of code talkers from World War II. And I've had one friend, H, say he joined the Marines because he could not find a warrior job anywhere else. We were infantrymen. At any rate, H was Navajo. I had known him for years, even spent a couple of weekends at his family's place near Gallup. I told him about my hallucination. He got quiet and said, I'll call him B, another Marine in my company, also Navajo, but I did not know him nearly as well as I knew H. He's a bad guy. I'd stay away from him. Now, it's always been difficult to tell if H was joking. He was a man of very few words and fewer jokes, but he seemed very serious. I told him to quit messing with me. He responded by telling me that B was a skinwalker. I had never heard that term. That came from a family of skinwalkers. and that they were like bad witch doctors. At that point, I didn't know what to believe, so I dropped it. I can say that every time I came across B after that point, he just stared at me. I gave him a wide berth from then on. He had some other odd experiences in the American Southwest Desert, as well as what was probably a jinn, and when I was embedded with Iraqi troops years later, we could see a man walking around in the darkness, but nothing with thermal or IR sights. But that was by far the strangest, and the only time I ever came in contact with anything remotely Skinwalker related.